technology is always a solution in the crisis. So technology will be really handy. There are multiple areas in which this technology would be adopted. One area is in the conduction of admission tests, the learning space.
For online education to really become mainstream and enroll, millions of students rather than hundreds of thousands of students, we need to have online degrees that are accredited by the various agencies.
My message to all the students and the higher education stakeholders is we need to double our efforts in this time in order to sustain and keep our economy afloat.
In India, we have to look at technology and education 4.0 as actually providing education to the uneducated, people who are not getting quality education.
Education 3.0 was nothing but technology driven. This is now going to be a permanent feature and is now going to figure in all the teaching learning activities of times to come. A very good evening to everyone, to all the audience. Thank you, Taranjot and Collegedunia for this opportunity. I think just after 2 days of its announcement, we are discussing this important document. So it goes without saying that we still need to understand and digest all that has been said. But my initial remarks would be like this, that number one, this policy has come to us after 34 years of gap, I would say. But in terms of waiting, I will say easily 15 years. Fortunately for us, it covers many, many important aspects. I've been reading the newspapers from the last 2 days and seeing the media. I've hardly found any criticism except for a hardcore person who will anyway be against any such document sometimes for whatever their reasons. So I've not found anything. I think policy is very, very well researched in my opinion. I myself might have given over a period of time 4 or 5 different inputs in different capacities through AIU as a president, through independent, through as a vice chancellor in some capacity. Taranjot, my initial remark will also entail some bullets in terms of what I have liked most in it, because there will be many, many points which we'll keep discussing. Yeah, not to take all the points. Number one, very, very categorically, the point of making the regulatory framework much more simpler or combining, except for, I think, Bar Council and Medical Council or equivalents. All others are going to be amalgamated. I think that will be wonderfully well. Reasons for that are obvious, that we'll not need separate libraries, separate buildings, separate land, separate resolutions, separate teachers. If I have to teach mathematics or English in a university, I don't have to depute them. I don't have to recruit them in those particular schools separately, showing them. They can be in the pool of things. So that's the beauty of that. Number two, what is more important is that we have multidisciplinarity being accepted openly in this particular case. They are talking about that. We had a lot of difficulties. I had a lot of difficulties in my institutions which I have headed, that people will simply say, no, sir, his undergraduate degree is in different discipline, though it's related, but different, and postgraduate is different and PhD is different. Even if he's a Nobel laureate, they will tend to say his degrees don't qualify as per the requirement of certain council. And I used to force them to make them sit and take a decision who should take it. I think those boundaries will become fuzzy and it will become easier for us. The third thing is openness towards internationalization. Quality comes from the competition. We had many good institutions, but they could never succeed in terms of quality or positioning because they were thinking that they are the kings. They were not subjected to any competition. Therefore, opening up of internationalization will subject everyone to competition. And of course, through competition, we'll learn also. We'll imbibe some good things, we'll discard some bad things, and so on and so forth, which will be there. The fourth and the last point from my side to begin with would be that it is more learner-centric. It is more student-centric. It is going to deliver students what they want to learn, rather than it is going to be a policy to tell us that you teach what you want to teach or what you want to deliver. I think it will be, in a common parlance, you can say it is going to be a customer-centric kind of a policy. Customer being the student. I'm sorry using a commercial terminology here, but I think it is simpler to understand. So in that sense, it's very, very good. And finally, whether it is commented in a big way on online or not, the very fact that it's talking about the virtual labs very, very clearly and categorically, if the labs can be done online, I think rest can be done online. That's an indirect interpretation. Online is already happening. Government is openly talking about it. And therefore, once again, the newer methods of technology teaching, its adoption and its propagation, scaling up the GER and all that is going to happen through the technology only.
One of the things that the National Education Policy talks about is the redefinition of the meaning of a university. That the policy actually redefines and reimagines what is a university, and that's very essential in order to, of course, to create outstanding universities in which creativity and innovation flourish, but also for India and for its development. Higher education is so critical to the development of a country, to actually be able to expand and open students' horizons. And I think there are many elements in this, the ability to choose different subjects. I would have loved to do that when I was an undergraduate student. And that's why I thought, that's why I went overseas, because I could choose from different subjects and courses and put those together depending on what I was interested in and find out really what I'm interested in. Critical thinking, integrity, all these things, the creation of knowledge, and also the kind of emphasis on Indian or the Indian subcontinent. I think that's very very promising. The 4-year undergraduate program is also very welcome. That's something that, in fact, our Chancellor, Professor Dinesh Singh, Chancellor of K.R. Mangalam University, former Vice Chancellor of Delhi University, he initiated this idea, but it was shot down at Delhi University. There was so much resistance to that. But now again, it's come back, it's been resurrected, and the value of that is being, I think people see the value of that, of being able to go into a kind of a postgraduate degree while you're doing the undergraduate program. The National, Research Foundation, I think that's an excellent idea also. Other countries, and the US or Germany have the German Research Council, which has tremendous amount of funds. The applications are very, very difficult and rigorous, but you're able to do work and get funding for research. Again, very critical. I think that's again a cornerstone of this National Education Policy document.
Good evening to everybody. So as mentioned by my previous speakers, the entire new education policy, the really appreciable thing of that is it was open to feedback. A lot of public feedback was incorporated, a lot of revisions were done, and finally it has been announced, this week. And it is really very futuristic, especially with the aim of putting India in the world map in terms of the quality of education that we offer. So definitely a lot of plus points are there in the policy, but I'll just in the interest of time, I'd like to highlight 3 key points which I really appreciate from this policy, especially when we talk about higher education sector. First and foremost is the multidisciplinarity. And the policy talks about even government institutions, right from Indian Institute of Technologies, IITs and NITs becoming multidisciplinary. I think this itself is an opportunity for such institutions to be come atop the world rankings. Currently, that is one thing which we always see, that none of the Indian institutions are able to come in the top world rankings. So making one of the IITs or any of the government institutions including a lot more fields in one institution definitely opens up this opportunity. And I think that is one of the futuristic goals of seeing one of these institutions within the top ranks at the world level in the next upcoming years. So I would say that is one of the first things of the NEP which we are really looking forward to. Second thing which I really like about the NEP is the gradual doing away of the affiliation system. So one thing about education in India, being a large country, and even every state in itself is very diverse. So what works in one part of the state or one part of the country would not necessarily work in the other part. And a common syllabus for the entire state or for the entire university itself is a challenge. So now with the gradual doing away of the affiliation system and granting autonomy to colleges to become degree granting institutions gives them, or I would say rather empowers them to devise their own curriculum based on their own locational advantages and disadvantages. So they could do an analysis of that and develop their own curriculum based on their stakeholder interests. So that definitely would help institutions to flourish who were previously constrained by the syllabus of the affiliating university, I would say. So that's the second thing which I'm really looking forward to. And third thing I would say in terms definitely is the push towards increasing our gross enrollment ratio of the country to 50% in the next upcoming years. So a lot of initiatives for that is one of the main interesting things is like, the multiple entry exit options for a degree. So students can move from transfer easily with the academic bank of credits, which will be set up centrally, transferring from one institution to the other, taking a break in between such things become possible, or even transferring from one program to another. You can start off in engineering but end up with an arts degree at the end. So lots of such opportunities are available to students to pursue their interest, come out successfully, and definitely increase the GER and their employability and skills as a whole at the end of the day. So definitely I would say the policy is futuristic. We are really looking forward to seeing how the implementation and the guidelines would come about, to see how this policy will be implemented going forward.
This is a very progressive policy, a very ambitious policy, I must say, very well documented, very well researched, I'm sure. And I think a very, very welcome reform which has been sought after. So after 3 decades when we have got it, I think this was much sought after. Why I say so? Because the changes that have happened in last 2 decades especially, they have been phenomenal in terms of technology, overall evolvement that has happened. So I think our education policy was very required to match up to that sort of pace. And I think now the reform that has been proposed is very much in line with that sort of change that's required. The few things which I really liked about the first one is the thrust on online and distance education. So online and distance education has been there for a long time, but I think there was always a difference in perception. The students felt that people would go for online only if they don't get admission in campus. However, I think because of this COVID era or because of this reform that's now coming up, I think that sort of parity would come up and online education would also be looked at par with that. Many reputed institutes, in fact, would be launching online education because of policymakers trust that we are getting on that. So that is one, online education. And because of that, I'm sure right now when we talk about online education, technology is a hindrance. We all have seen because of COVID, overnight institutes had to get into online education. The faculty wasn't very comfortable. Students in remote locations especially, they did not have the resources available. So yes, that transition has happened, but yes, there is a still long way to go. I'm sure with this policy, easier, the acceptability will be much more. So that was my first point on online education. My second point is about, I'm sure this kind of flexibility that has come up, the holistic learning that has come up in terms of vocational training, the flexibility of students, multiple entry and exit. I think this will in fact generate a lot of employability skills also, because what we have seen in the past also, I was just sharing with my co-panelists before this started, that in MBA admission interviews, we often hear students saying, I got into engineering or BCom or BBA because my family wanted me to do this, because my friends were getting into it. But once I got the admission, then I realized, no, I wasn't that interested. But ultimately, I had to spend another 4 years into that. I think this multiple entry exit thing will give students a lot of flexibility to understand, step out of it, still step into the career what they want. Especially, after 10th, we have that pressure of telling our children to choose science, commerce, arts. At that stage, when children are not even aware what each field gets into, right? So I think that pressure will ease out. That was my second point. A quick third thing is this foreign universities coming in. I'm sure overall the level of education will step up. The competition will increase. The opportunities will increase. Overall education level will step up. So these are the 3 key points I wanted to share.
Thanks, Dr. Chandni. So, considering the criticality, the government has set a target of 6% of the GDP for the education sector.
Do you see that number being achieved in any time soon, or is it just too ambitious targets that are set by the government?
I don't think so. It's ambitious. It should have been done right in the first time when it was mentioned as 6%. So we'll not go into the history because that will not be good. What we want is our future to be controlled by us. 6% is a 25% increase compared to the previous. We have touched up to 4.5% as per my information. I may be slightly wrong, but 4.5% is what we have achieved. And with that, if there is a 25% increase, it's fine because the number of institutions are growing rapidly. In last 2 years, I have seen emergence of 200 more universities, in my opinion, 2.5 years. Same way, we are seeing many top institutions trying to come, industrial houses trying to come. So investment is heavily required and government has its own constraints. It was said at one point of time that 90% of their budget is going to typically some top-notch institutions and not necessarily to state-private. So I'm sure this funding trickle will also reach the state-private. There was a question, would a central government rule the roost in this case with this policy, or would the state be involved? My answer is none of them. We have to wake up. We have to say, and you probably know that power can never be given, power has to be taken. So if autonomy is to be given to me, I have to take the autonomy and take the plunge in that swimming pool called autonomy. And that's how I'll be able to swim in that. So I think educational institutions by very nature is autonomous. At the most, they have a governing board. Fortunately, there are no political representatives in most of the institutions which I'm trying to talk about. And therefore, it's all academic people, industry people, people with a lot of value from wherever quarter they come. And therefore, they should take bold decisions and go ahead with that. And therefore, this money, if used purposefully, I'm sure government can be put under pressure to make it 7% also. So I will be happy to look at the future of it. But this has to be related to what we call autonomy. And I've been a big advocate in saying that financial autonomy can never be achieved in any institutions unless you create your own corpuses. So unfortunately, that we are not talking about, that whether we'll be able to create big corpuses. If money is my own, then I take my decision. If someone is giving me money, either my promoter or my government, then obviously I'll have to toe the line to some extent. But let me tell you, no one in this world is fully independent and no one can achieve. Even Trump or Modi ji will have to listen to the public in terms of where to spend the money. And therefore, there is a cycle in it. And I'm sure this cycle will work well for India. Fortunately, this is what we have been crying for a long time, that we need more money to grow Indian education setup. And this kind of a thing is happening. So I have tried to answer the question also, whether it will be state in power or whatever. Someone had asked one more question in the same context. The answer is same. They said one size fits all. No, I don't think so. One size fits all is what is there. Autonomy is being given and autonomy has to be used. And therefore, you measure your own size and fit your suit to whatever size you want it to be. Government is not going to come and measure you at time and again. But public will do. Public will come to you means your measurement is good and fitment is good. And if public is not coming to you, I think it will be an adverse reaction. And therefore, you can say that the finance increase or the budget increase is a very, very good step.
Professor Malik, money is actually one of the most pressing problems that actually stands in the way of the education reforms. The current NEP, in a way, has implicitly kind of decided that it seems that the private participation with respect to the finance is actually essential. Do you see that?
I think that's again very critical, and we have to see within this new imagined landscape of education, to what degree are we going to have more and more private institutions, and where do those institutions again get their funding? As Dr. Sancheti has said, autonomy depends on the kind of financial power you have. And if you look at models, many models, for example, you have in the US, there's a whole system of endowments, which we don't really have yet. I was teaching at Nalanda University before coming to Kiramangam University. I was the dean there. And we tried to, we had somebody who was on the governing body who was actually looking after endowments. It was not very successful, but at least that idea was there so that there's increased autonomy, and then you can do all these things, preparing a curriculum that you want and the pedagogies that you want and inviting people and so on and so forth, that can actually happen. Again, the question of 6% GDP and where is that going to go and where will that be actually fruitful? And this question of the relationship again between finance and power. So where will the government actually be, controlling educational institutions, higher educational institutions, if they're going to provide this kind of funding? And I think it has to go into, for example, the National Research Foundation or into infrastructure. This is where that GDP and maybe the other areas needs to be invested. Infrastructure, and particularly in rural areas, infrastructure to build up the kind of technology that's needed for online education, which is missing in many places in India. Not able to actually participate in that fully. So and providing a corpus that the government can do is for research funding. So I think those are areas where the government can contribute in terms of what they're setting up, the GDP, the 6% GDP. Other than that, we'll have to see, to what degree private institutions, more and more private institutions are going to come up in the country and how they then set up their own kind of funding through fees, but I think also through endowments and other avenues, if there happen to be some other avenues that need to be thought of.
Thanks, Dr. Malik. Dr. Shashi, my question to you is regarding, let's move a little away from the financial and money aspect and discuss more about the employability and the labor aspect of it. Do you see the NEP 2020 improving the employability of these students that are getting into the industry?
Yes. So NEP 2020, first of all, we have to understand that they don't define the syllabus or how the pedagogy should be. So what, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, NEP 2020, one of the really interesting points about NEP 2020 is doing away with the affiliation system and empowering institutions to be degree granting institutions. When each institution can grant their own degree, it gives them the autonomy to develop their own syllabus based on what their strengths are, how their student profiles are, what kind of targets target industries they are looking for their students or their graduates to look at. Many such factors can be taken into account by each and every single institution and develop their own syllabus, and as a result develop the teaching pedagogy for the students as well. Giving this autonomy or empowering this to the institutions will definitely see a change, I would say a paradigm shift in terms of how we should then start looking at what would be the regional or the locational advantages of institutions would be, what they want to, how they see their graduates coming out, and then focus on developing the teaching methodologies, syllabus based around that. Once that is done, definitely yes, in terms of empowering the students to making them more hands-on, giving them a more hands-on approach, giving them a more skills-based approach would be possible. So, to answer your question, the policy does not state this at all. The policy basically gives this autonomy to the institutions, and the institutions would then have to develop or chart a course or a plan of action for themselves. And definitely, yes, if this is implemented in the right way by the institutions, this can be achieved. So we can definitely produce, and definitely, yes, this has been a problem which industry has always been telling. Right, so that most of our graduates are they're not employable. Now, with the increased autonomy and the power that institutions would have to frame their own syllabus, frame the way in which they can conduct their programs, they can definitely involve their constituents, be it industry, students, faculty members, everyone can come together of that particular region and definitely work out a different way, a different methodology to make the students more employable and give them a more hands-on approach. So the policy gives the autonomy, the implementation is left to us. We should be empowered and we should come up with an ideological change to get that implemented in our own institutions.
Thanks, Dr. Shashi. Dr. Shalini, do you see the common entrance test move of NEP 2020 is going to be something which is revolutionary, and the private universities welcoming it? Yeah.
I think I'm a big advocate for a single facility of this nature. That's my personal view, because I don't see any beauty in doing 10 tests and in one I'm coming number one and in another one I'm coming last. Then how would you rate me if you happen to know what Sandeep Sancheti's performance in these two tests are there? I must also quote something very, very unique I came across 15, 20 years back in this so-called tough IIT JEE examination. A guy who topped IIT JEE examination in his attempt 15, 20 years back, topped, I'm saying number one in the country, failed in the first year after going to a certain IIT. I don't want to quote the IIT and the name of the person. I know both, by the way. And therefore, I'm saying that there is no correlation between success in this test or that test. One is fine. What you require is multiplicity of attempt. If I'm unable to prove my mettle in one examination because I am poorly placed, my access was not good, my health was not good, my preparation was not good, but I'm otherwise good, then I should be given another opportunity. Life is all about opportunity. You fail once doesn't mean that you are a complete failure for the rest of the life. I think this NTA business, which is going to come in single test called CAT or CET, whatever it may be, is a very good step, because after all, we want heterogeneity in our admissions. I don't want to cater to only Tamil Nadu, or within Tamil Nadu only Chennai students, and within Chennai only, let's say the Kanchipuram or whatever district I am in, I want to do Chengalpet and all that. No, I don't want that. I want global. And to do global, I think I'll have to adopt a global or national level examination.
And the last question is regarding the most important aspect for any policy making, the implementation. How fast do you think, or how rapidly do you think NEP 2020 is going to be implemented in India?
In terms of implementation, because the policy itself talks about going on till 2035.
Yeah.
So the policy itself envisions 15 years, and everything there is no clear mention about a timeline in terms of implementation, but just by 2035, so and so are the targets we hope to achieve. So definitely, as a stakeholder in this policy, I would say the sooner the guidelines are given, that would be better. Now, when it comes to implementation, what I hope, or rather, because we don't know what is going to be, because we still don't know what the thoughts are behind the implementation as that. What would the best possible way would be, the government not imposing a lot, just giving a guideline or a white paper of sorts and leaving it, decentralizing it to the institutions to develop the curriculum, the mechanism, of implementation up to themselves. So if that were done, be it at higher education level or the school education level, if that were done, definitely the success of the policy in terms of implementation, the outcomes of it would be much more successful rather than a rigid implementation if given from the center or from the state governments, is what I would envision, I would say. So definitely, yes, in terms of implementation, we are looking forward to seeing what the guidelines would be coming. The hope is they are as liberal and empower the institutions at multiple levels to take decisions based on their own strengths to benefit their own communities. If that is done, I'm sure we can definitely achieve the vision stated in the policy.
Implementation would be challenging. As Dr. Sancheti has mentioned, each one of us will have to take the onus of that implementation. One thing that is concerning is, yes, it is a great policy that has come up from the central body. Now, how will it be adapted at the state level? How will it be actually executed on the ground level? Yes, that is something that we have to see how far it goes. In terms of implementation, I'm sure it is going to phase out. Even if the deadline, it says 2035, the kind of humongous task it is, I'm sure even if it starts in another 1 year, it will be phased out over the years. So I think the best way would be the central and state government works in tandem for execution so that we are able to meet the objectives of quality education.
Looking at the time frames, of the document itself, I feel when I look at that, I feel a little impatient. There's some years in that in which I may not be, involved at universities. I want to see it happen much sooner. But I understand, there's, reality, ground realities, and we're living in a, the immediate thought that came to me, we're in a democratic republic. You have to really keep at it. I think you have to keep at it to implement this. To implement any kind of, this is a almost revolutionary kind of vision for education. To implement this, you have to keep at it. You have to almost, practice it on a daily basis. To put it, just frame it differently to what Dr. Sancheti said, you have to own it. Otherwise, this is going to, it'll also dissipate into something else, different interpretations and different views and all that, which is okay. That's part of the process. So anyway, to come back, I think this is a remarkable document. It really does lay down what I think the foundations for learning to happen, and to come back again to what Dr. Sancheti said, learner-centric, a policy. And when this is implemented, it will absolutely transform many things in India, not just educational institutions, because that is going to impact the whole fabric of society, the way people think and act and behave and so on. So last words, thank you very much for organizing this. It's been a very fruitful and stimulating to be with all of you on this panel. And thank you, Taranjot, and thank you to Collegedunia.
Implementation is of a dream. By the way, everyone is echoed. I also call it as a dream. I must say that I challenged the policy makers when I got a chance, the moment it got pronounced in terms of an initial document. I said, how come you can have the 10,000 institutions giving degrees? Okay, that was a typical question I had put to them, because I thought it's difficult, and it's still difficult, let me tell you. But when we are doing questions and answers, the committee member who was trying to answer me, I'm not naming necessarily the committee member here, I was told that why our dreams should be limited. Dreams anyway has to be unlimited. And then only we'll try to achieve that. If in the limit, in the decision making of what we call dream or policy, if we limit itself further, you will dilute it, or further you will achieve lesser than that. And therefore, they said that we have dreamt what is right for the institution. It is for people like us to implement that.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Professor Sancheti. And thanks a lot to all the panelists and the viewers who joined in. It's a long way between the ideas and the execution. But maybe, just maybe, some things are actually headed in the right direction. On that note, I'll thanks to all the viewers and the panelists. Thanks a lot for joining in. Goodbye. Good evening.
Thank you.